But we're going to have to convene this meeting. Despite the objections of my council colleagues, I call this meeting to order. I want to begin actually on a couple of points. For those who've celebrated the weekend of Robbie Burns, I want to wish you well. I'm, of course, wearing the Stuart clan colors. And today is Family Literacy Day, which is a day that is worked on very hard by a number of groups in our community, including our library and others. So I want to acknowledge the work that they do for literacy in our community, and I'm going to hand the microphone over to Councillor Nicholson, who has an announcement that's less cheery than that.
Well, that's right. Well, I always try to begin by being cheerful. So those of you who come to council regularly will have learned not to try to sit in the seats just in front of the back row on that side of the aisle going up, because they're usually occupied by a singular group of women who keep track of all the things that we're doing. And I'm told tonight that earlier this month, Margaret Tenbrink, who regularly sat there for as long as I've been watching council, and probably longer than that, passed away. Margaret was president of the Ranch Park Community Association since before I think I came to Ranch Park, and right up till the end, and was a regular feature at our council meetings and always a welcome addition. We'll miss her. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to add that there's one on-table item this evening. Item number 6 is appointment to the Joint Family Court and Youth Justice Committee.
There are undoubtedly copies of it.
On the back table, yes.
On the back table.
In blue. Item 1 are minutes of the regular council meeting held Monday, January 20th. The recommendation is that council approve those minutes.
Second. Moved by Councillor Rasmussen, seconded by Councillor Sikora. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
The next 3 items arise out of this evening's public hearing. The first one is in relation to City of Coquitlam Heritage Designation Bylaw number 4457-2014 for unit number 5 at 307 Begin Street. The recommendation is that Council give second, third, and fourth and final readings to City of Coquitlam Heritage Designation Bylaw number 4457.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, seconded by Councillor Nicholson. Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor. You know, one thing it's a good development, but one thing I'm concerned about is the fact is we've taken a house and have a developer spend all that money upgrading it that's not going to look nowhere near to what the old house was. So, I don't know why we even went to the trouble of restoring this house, because if you were to, say, a few weeks from now, a few months from now, even maybe right after it's done, just ask the people, what was that house? Why is it heritage? Because not a heritage anymore. It's probably the flooring of the house might be available, and but not the whole building. So it's a good development. So I'm certainly not against the development. I'm for it. But why we're putting a developer through all this trouble when he could have maybe spent the money on other things that are much more beneficial to the city? If the house would have been restored in its original way, but it needed a lot of work to be done, and I don't know why we're putting a developer through that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, there still is some confusion over that one, because actually the house ended up more like it originally was now than it was 2 years ago. 2 years ago, it had been the subject of a few other renovations over the years, and I actually think it's a nice accomplishment to be able to achieve the heritage designation of that home. I've got Councillor Hodge.
Yeah,
who's been president of our Heritage Society, so Councillor Hodge.
Yes, and it's when you look at heritage and historic homes in not just in our city but in general, and there's a number of things that qualify for being a heritage site or a heritage home, and it can be history of place, it can be history of character, it can be the actual heritage construction and the heritage value of a home, or it can be that a historic event took place there. And, you know, my preference is to restore homes and you know, be as, you know, sort of as pure as you can in the actual restoration and stick to the original home. In this one, because of the new use of the home, there was so much work that needed to be done to bring it up to code that to people on the street and the residents, it looked like the house was knocked down and that a new replica house was built. And in many cases, that's what it was. It was a replica house built with the original material. I don't think the residents realized how much was saved and taken off site and brought back. Is it the original house? Well, I guess that's the point of view that you come from. But what we do know is that in terms of character of the neighborhood, it brings that character back, and it looks more like what the original house originally looked like when it was built back when the Paré family lived there. So I think it accomplished that. It's accomplished character. It is a historic site, and it is a historic from who lived there. Is it a pure heritage home in the sense of a heritage home? Probably not. But I think what it does do is it sends a message is that we are trying to do what we can to protect the heritage in our city. I look forward to some of the other projects that are underway where we've put heritage revitalization agreements. The one at 1313 Cartier, it's going to be more in line with my vision of a heritage home because the work on that property is going to be done on other spots on the property, not to the house itself. We look at the Red Barn and some of the others, and I think that the community will embrace those projects, but they're all different. There's different circumstances around each project and different reasons for protecting them, and I think that anything that we can do to protect one of our heritage homes, it's worth doing and taking using the tools that we have in our toolbox, and it's not always going to be built the way we'd like to, but I give credit to the builder for working on this. Certainly it would have been easier to put something completely different on site, but he's tried to bring back the original heritage value of the site and the heritage character of an important part of our community. That's right just off of Laval Square, and I think that that's an area where we want to try to accomplish that. So I will be voting in favor of this. Thank you.
Councillor Cirillo.
Although we didn't have speakers on this item tonight, we did have some emails in. And as Councillor O'Neill mentioned earlier tonight, residents had concerns around privileges that may come with a heritage designation, such as tax breaks and that sort of thing. And then also some concerns about the fact that it looked like there wasn't a lot of original materials that were maintained. And through some of my research before this meeting, and then also what we heard tonight about, and some of the pictures that we saw about the actual salvage that was used, I would say that there are more restrictions than there are benefits when it comes to heritage homes as far as resale and the freedom to make changes to them. So that to me isn't a concern. And also too, with the care shown to this restoration in regards to taking all the siding, the posts, the window frames, I will also be approving this item tonight.
Thank you. The button is sensitive. Councillor O'Neill.
And I've been known to be sensitive sometimes, too.
Yeah, you're very similar to this button.
That's right. I knew that if Councillor Hodge spoke long enough, I was feared that if he spoke long enough, he would touch on the one issue I wanted to talk about. And just at that, I thought he was going to miss it, but just at the end, he skated by it and just did mention it. And I want to really underscore this one, that this home is at kind of the gateway, one of the gateways to Laval Square, and in having this heritage character right there into a very unique piece of urban architecture that is that square, that saw a community built around an old church, Our Lady of Lourdes. Notre Dame de Lourdes, is that correct?
Oui, c'est ça.
Oh, c'est vrai. I think that
for an Irish.
Yeah, pretty good. So, I really think that that's one of the more important aspects of this home being at that corner. You're coming into Laval Square there, and it's a nice howdy-do entranceway, and so that's one of the reasons, one of the many reasons I'll support this. Thank you.
Councillor Asmussen.
Well, thank you. I want to give the developer a ton of credit for his work, the proposal he did, the Paré residence, Mr. Paré, his photograph collection, what he meant to this community and the heritage retaining of his house. And the shape of the house that what it was in, and being able to bring it back to the appearance of what it was at the original time. I really think the developer did quite a good job on doing the best he could at a great expense to save something of a heritage. And I agree with Mr. Hodge that maybe it's not the most perfect, but it is a restoration of a building that was in poor shape, about a family that means a lot to that area in the Laval and the French community. So, and when we had this application come before us, we had the opportunity at that time to question the need for the heritage, and we all said that we felt that the heritage of that and retaining of that building was needed. And so to give this heritage designation bylaw to protect the integrity going forward throughout the future is just, to me, a simple yes, because we've already made the decision to make sure that it is kept and protected in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Second, third, and fourth reading of the heritage designation bylaw. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. I do want to acknowledge our Francophone community. There's so many people in our community that have worked hard on the heritage of their community. I mean, so much of the architecture, the built form, and heritage of our Francophone community has been lost. Tant de nos édifices historiques sont perdus. They're gone. My mother was French-Canadian. She chose Millardville because of its Francophone history, and I think when we find some historic value in a house like this, the Paré family, as has been mentioned, did a tremendous amount in our community. They were true pioneers. His brother was our first police chief. This is a family that, a house that is historic partly because of the people that lived there, the family that lived there, the name that was attached to that. And I'll tell you, in one of my previous careers, I had the opportunity to work on the restoration of heritage buildings, and they are complicated. They are challenging, and you end up trying to salvage that banister, that newel post, and you do what you can, and you make it work. And I think they've done a great job of restoring that line drawing that showed a house from 100 years ago. And I think this is a pretty special place, as they say, an entrance to, as has been said, an entrance to Laval Square, and our Francophone community, I suspect, is happy that we've been able to see it protected. Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
Item 3, also arising out of this evening's public hearing, relates to a rezoning application for 635 and 645 Gauthier Avenue. The recommendation is that Council give second, third, and fourth and final readings to City of Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4461, 2014.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Sikora, second by Councillor O'Neill. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. I'm going to support this. I quite like the development, but I have one question. You had mentioned that the roadway or lane, driveway, lane, whatever you want to call it, that's between the two lots, which provides access back to the lane that the city will fully build at some time. So it's under a statutory right-of-way. So is it possible, and I know it is, to put in the right-of-way that at the time the lane is fully completed, the back lane, then that property could revert back to the owners?
Mr. McIntyre.
Your Worship, took advantage of the opportunity between the public hearing and the council meeting to speak with my colleague, GM of Engineering, and we just compared notes on that. And that is certainly a possibility. I think, I won't put words in Joseph's mouth, but I got the sense that he could see that as this is sort of an interim condition, but it wouldn't be his ideal arrangement for a lane system in that area. I'm not sure if we'd want to codify that in the actual statutory right-of-way. I think it's something more for the transportation planning in that area, that as other opportunities present itself and that lane system can be completed in a more conventional, rational way, then we might want to go back and revisit that segment. and take the right-of-way off. Because really, at that point in time, you'd have duplication. There'd be greater length of lane that you would need, but you'd be sort of predetermining what a future council would decide on that. So obviously we take council's direction, but I think it's something we just want to flag as a potential. But I think you're talking many years out before that would be
well, I think I am too, because some of the properties along there are nowhere near ready to go. But excuse me?
Well, perhaps in 10 years you can move a motion to revert it back.
I won't be here in 10 years, trust me. I think that I think it's a good solution now, because if they want to get on with the development, that's their option. But I do believe it can revert back, so thank you.
Okay. Councillor Wilson.
I just had two questions. One, on either side of the back lane, as proposed, it encroaches into the neighboring properties, and I'm assuming that's so they can back up and maneuver the cars. Sorry, attachment 8.
Approaches into right-of-way, doesn't it? Or is that into the right-of-way?
Well, the right-of-way, but it's people's yards right now, right? There's no lane there now, so it's people's yards. So
okay, this is where people are using the lane as part of their backyard.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
yeah. So right now
it encroaches into their encroachment. Yes.
I'm a rookie.
No.
We've never come across this before.
So I'm assuming that, if I was living in 647 Gauthier, instead of my left side of my fence going straight back, I'd have a little jog. And the only reason we have to do that is so people can back their cars out of the parking spots. Okay. The other question is about, oh, sorry, did you want to answer? I saw you nodding, so.
I can formalize it and say yes.
And then if we're ever going to continue that lane, I'm assuming it's kind of north at that point. There's two houses on Gerard, or a duplex on Gerard, 654 and 656, where it looks like the garages were built right along the right-of-way, and it's hard to see without looking on Google Maps. But so what do we do about that? And I guess my first question is why were they allowed to build them right like that? And then what would be the solution to that? And I'm sorry I didn't ask you this earlier today.
No, Your Worship, a fair question, because I think Councillor Wilson's quite right. That would be the logical outlet for this lane system. We got, if this goes ahead, we got the first sort of installment, if you will, mid-block, and pushing that lane to the north and east out to Hart would be the logical way to go. And also, it's quite clear that there are portions of the lane that are fully dedicated, other portions are not. I look at a couple lots to the south, in fact, there's no lane whatsoever there. As those adjoining lands were to develop, we'd be looking for the additional lane dedication to at least complete that. With construction that's taken place in the past, that's one of the things staff do look at with the building permit applications, make sure it's not within, obviously, crossing a property line or in a road allowance. There may have been permits that were granted previous that allowed for construction up into an area that encroaches. It's a good your photo? Well, we'd have to take that away and have a look at that. That seems a little odd to see garages extending back into where the lane extension would go. Yeah.
Thanks.
Councillor Hodge.
Okay. I really don't like the lane there, and I wish it wasn't needed, and I wish we could have just come in off of Hart. When I look at attachment 8 and I see where the intersecting lane hits the lane at the back, there's room to park 2 cars there beside the existing parking spaces. So if that lane wasn't there, there'd be room to put 2 parking spots at the back coming in perpendicular. on the street. There's probably room for 2 more parking spots on the street if that lane wasn't there. So when I look at this, that lane is costing us 4 parking spots in that neighborhood. And not to mention the fact that there could have been some green space in between those houses. So I'm not a big fan, and to staff, I don't like laying down pavement to put in these interconnecting lanes in our neighborhoods. I get it at the end of a lane where we need it, and we need it for access in and out, but this is going to become redundant because we're going to need to do the exact same thing half a block down at the end to prevent a dead-end lane. And I think at that time, I'd like to see this lane come out. The challenge is that the developer has now put 2 garages in the middle here. You know, as I said, I don't know there's anything we can do, and I certainly don't want to send this back to the drawing board, but I suspect that if the developer had their way, they'd prefer that the lane wasn't there either. And my guess is that the original proposal was for pavers and not a paved lane. And you're right, you know, weeds grow between the pavers. But if it's done right, so does grass, and you have permeable soil. And, you know, so I just think that, you know, we could have done, you know, I think we could have done this better, but I realize that we have challenges because of the access to that lane and because we want to provide as much parking as we have. So I'll support it, but I think we got to try to not just think that the easy thing to do is when we have 2 lots side by side is that we trim off a section off of each one and put down pavement, because I don't like pavement in the middle of our neighborhoods. Thank you.
Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Your time's up.
No.
Anybody else?
No, it isn't. No, it isn't, because I agree with the councillors on either side of me. I certainly don't think it would be fair to turn this down or take it only to third so that the developer or proponent could have a chance to come back and say, well, let's do something different with the lane. I don't think that would be the right thing to do. But I do think Councillor Reid's question about, in the fullness of time, could this revert to the property owner, and could they make what use of it they chose, whether it was pavers or grass or blacktop or whatever, is a good one. And I think the simplest solution for all of us would be to ask that the discussion between Councillor Reid and staff just now be fully documented in the minutes, so that there's something there that someone someday can point to and say, this is what council or councillors thought at the time. Thank you.
Your Worship, if I could on that point, and maybe I was a little hasty in responding before, let us take that away as direction. We can talk with the city solicitor. You're just a little reluctant to put wording into legal documents that are committing you to an act off 10, 15, 20 years in the future. But let us discuss that. If we want to have some clarity that at this point in time when this development went ahead, the Coquitlam Council today had this in mind, that there may be that option for a future council to decide on. So if that wording can be put in there to the satisfaction of the city solicitor and the applicant, we'll see what we can do.
Thank you.
Okay, on that point, since they're contemplating speaking on behalf of council, and one council member has raised it, are there any objections to that kind of language in a general sense? Seeing none, I think we're okay. Yeah. I wouldn't want. We generally try not to have one council member speak on behalf of all of council, unless it's the mayor. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Motion before us. All in favor? Opposed? And that carries unanimously. I am, and with a bit of regret that Madame Lisée herself wasn't able to join us tonight and be here with us. Our condolences to her family. Madam Clerk.
Item 4 is the last item arising under this evening's public hearing. City of Coquitlam Citywide Official Community Plan Bylaw and a zoning amendment bylaw related to 1503 and 1509 Coast Meridian Road. I'll ask that these recommendations be voted on separately. The first is that Council gives second, third, and fourth and final readings to City of Coquitlam Citywide Official Community Plan Bylaw number 4462, 2014.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Nicholson. All in Oops, Councillor Zerillo.
So just for clarity, we're voting on just 4462?
At this time, there's different voting measures for official community plan bylaws than there are for zoning bylaws.
Okay. Okay. So I had one question of clarity first, just before we start, because there was some questions about the difference in lot sizes, and I heard that there wasn't much difference. But from my initial look at this plan, it seems that it's an RS2. Through the chair, it's an RS2 looking to go to an RS8. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, through your worship.
And it's my understanding that an RS2 is approximately a 40,000 square foot lot, and an RS8 is a 4,000 square foot lot. Is that correct?
Correct. It's a 1 acre. RS2 is a 1 unit per acre, minimum lot size.
So these lot sizes then are going, I guess it's 10 times the density, through the chair. It's 10 times the density just on lot sizes alone, and I know there's issues with the topography, so we can't necessarily get them, but just for clarity.
Well, in fact, of course, the land currently is rural. It has been rural for a long time, and we're now making it into a neighborhood with streets and such, and normally that would involve at least 4 to 6 units to the acre, and in this case, just under 10. Now, the designation in the plan, she's referring to the rezoning. Right now, we're voting on the designation, or the OCP amendment, but the rezoning would be from RS2, which is rural, to an RS8,
Right.
8, but based on a 9 lot.
But we did have, and I understand, but in the original plan, we did have, it was 40,000. It's an RS2. It's an RS2 right now?
No, it's currently zoned RS2. In the plan, it's designated RS9.
Okay, so in the plan, it's RS9. So that's why we're saying we're going to 8 instead of 9. Thank you for that. So I wanted to just make a statement about this. I appreciate the work by the city and the developer. It's obvious we're working hard to satisfy each other's requests on this one and to get the development going. That being said, I would like to thank Mr. Verrill for his coverage tonight. What he spoke about is what I read as a new councillor coming into this desk. And as I went through the plan, I saw the same things. What I read was what he was talking about. The fact that we're looking for transit-orientated, strong livability, green communities, etc. And I was questioning our deviance from this body of work, because we invest a lot of time in these bodies of work, and I would want to see them come to fruition. So with that being said, I think we need to come up with a more innovative solution here. I understand that we want development here, that we want the developer to get full use of his land, but I don't see this development, although it may be mirroring and copying other developments in the neighborhood, I don't see this plan as fitting into that general framework that I read in the community plan. So I would like to thank Mr. Verrill for just coming forward and reminding us what was the initial vision for this area, and I understand fully that those things need to change over time, but to deviate this far seems a very, very far away from where we were originally.
So we're voting on the subject property, which is basically the large rectangle, not just these proposed lots. Is that correct? So the larger rectangular property is what we're voting on right now in terms of the change of zoning?
Your Worship, the first motion that's on there, number 1, this is the second, third, fourth, and final for the citywide official community plan. So the map that goes with that would be attachment 6. So it's the
Sure, but that's the rectangle, that whole rectangle, not just these lots.
Yeah, it would be, perhaps, Carrie, if I could ask, would you mind putting the OCP map up, the one with the the orange and green. Yeah, there we go. There. So that's the proposed OCP designations, and there's actually a map that has the label designations. That's the first bylaw that's before council tonight, is going to these land use designations there. If council was to support that, then you would next turn to the zoning bylaw that would be zoning the mid part of that area to the RS8. The other areas would remain under the RS2 zoning, and with the RS8 rezoning, that would then facilitate the subdivision that shows the 30 lots.
Thanks.
Councillor Reid?
Thank you. This can get a little difficult when you're new at it, because you sort of go, oh my gosh, what am I doing? But
No, Councillor Wilson's
Sorry.
microphone's still on. There we go. Got it.
is it on?
It's my fault. I was standing too far.
Most of the mountain is RS2 and large holdings. So that's what it is when we call this is greenfield development, most of it, although there's some houses on it. But basically we take that zone and then we downzone it to, I guess I'm talking to myself, sorry.
Again?
No, I was trying to help Councillor Zerillo by
Clarifying something for her.
clarifying some things for her. So
if you could start again, my apologies.
most of the mountain, well, I've already said that, so I'll just go forward. This, in the long-term plan, was looked at in the RS8 and RS9, which are the largest designations we have up there, other than there's some acreage that will still be there that we haven't touched. But these are the biggest lots we have. Yes, we wanted this to be a green community, and we wanted it to be transit-oriented and all that. But I'll tell you what happened to me when I first got on council many years ago in the 80s. They wouldn't build a school until they had a whole bunch of students. And you can't have students until you have a whole bunch of houses. And so you go in and you develop all the houses and you put all the people in, and then you're still waiting for the schools. So we're waiting for schools on Burke Mountain as well. But we're also waiting for transit, because they're not going to put buses where there aren't any people. So it's sort of a catch-22 no matter what we do. So once we get the people up there, then the buses are supposed to come, right? Isn't it build it and they will come? Well, we're building it, and right now, as I keep saying, a bus is sort of like Bigfoot. They're rarely seen, and, you can never catch one. I really think that, pardon? I think this is a good fit because it's larger lots. I would not have been able to look at townhouses or anything smaller, some of the small little houses on this lot, because it's getting very sensitive up there. So I'm quite happy with this. I think we had a really fulsome discussion on this, and I definitely will be supporting it.
Okay. Councillor O'Neill.
Yep, I'll be supporting it too. And one of the things that in the 2 years I've been on council is to come to appreciate the amazing amount of work that goes in to planning developments like this, dealing with environmental considerations. And when you talk about work, and we talked about this, I asked questions about this earlier this evening regarding not just the SPIA setbacks, but then the park space alongside of that, and then all the work that got done on that little Hyde Creek Tributary 5, the one that Councillor Wilson was talking about earlier this evening, that got diverted a bit. I mean, you look at some of this fine print on some of this, some of the documents we have here, and to see everything that they had to do to protect this area, and you realize that this is very high level city planning, very high level environmental protection, all of which costs a lot of money. And we all talk over the course of the last couple of years, we've talked about housing affordability. This stuff adds to the cost of our homes. You could bet that Town Line, if they didn't have to do all of this stuff, would be able to sell their homes for a lot less money. But people want environmental protection. The laws are in place to protect the environment the way it's being done here. if the plans, the overall vision for the area has changed over the last 10 or 15 years, things do change, as Councillor Reid was talking about, and so you have to look at each development proposal on its merits, I think, and take a look to see, indeed, if they've done all their due diligence and all their good work on such things as the street planning and the environmental protection and those sorts of things that they have to do by law, and that we make sure they do. And in all those respects, I'm very impressed with this. It's a difficult area with these streams and the setbacks. And the bottom line is that even though it's going to be fairly expensive to live up there compared to what they would have had to do many years ago, we are going to be providing all these new homes, 24 new homes for people to come and live here. And I think that's a great benefit not only to Coquitlam but to society in general. Adding more housing stock into the marketplace is a good thing, especially when it's done so well in a beautiful area with streamside trail eventually, things like that. Yeah, I think it looks to me like a very good development and one that I enthusiastically support. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Councillor Hodge.
There's no question. It's a wonderful place on the mountain. It's the former Johnson farm, and it's it's going to have. I think it's going to be. It's up at the top of the mountain. It's going to be a nice spot, and I'm happy it's going to be the larger lots because I think we need to have some variety up there. I'm hoping that whoever comes in that does the building will do some creative things, some nice homes up there because it has the potential to do that. I'm happy to see this. By doing this development, certainly we're going to have that SPIA protection around Tributary 5, in fact around both of them. I also like the idea of having that trail that's going to follow, that little extra on the outside of the SPIA land. There's still going to be a trail that's going to run parallel, and I can tell you, as somebody who lives up on the mountain and who uses those trails, they're an amazing asset to have in this community, to have those trail networks. And I hope that someday we'll find that spot where we can put a footbridge over from one of those cul-de-sacs, so that we also will have that. I am particularly happy to see the work that's going to be done with the creek, that tributary, so that hopefully we will actually see that not just being water contributing to the fish-bearing stream, but actually see fish being able to make their way up there, because by taking that spill or that waterfall at the side of the road out and actually lowering the pipe and allowing fish and everything will someday find their way up there. And it's amazing because we're finding fish up higher up into the mountain than we've ever seen before. So I think there's some good things that can come of this. Parking, I'm usually, if it's not Councillor Reid, it's myself harping about the parking, and I think in this case we're going to be okay. There are some areas in the mountains that we still have work to do, but I think with the larger lots and the some of the creative spots that we'll be able to create later, I think this is going to be a good development, and I thank the staff and the developer for the work they've put in on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Motion is second and third and fourth on OCP. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Zarrillo is opposed. The motion carries.
Second recommendation is that Council give second, third, and fourth and final readings to City of Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4463, 2014.
Second. Moved by Councillor Asmundson, second by Councillor Hodge. Councillor Zarrillo.
Yeah, so I have a sneaking suspicion that the zoning could also pass tonight. So I just wanted to ask through the chair about the fire breaks. It's my understanding that staff worked with Fire and Rescue for the Partington Creek plan in regards to policies around fire breaks. And I'm just wondering if they are incorporated in this rezoning application.
Your Worship, thank you. Yes, Councillor Zarrillo and I had a conversation about this, and I'm glad you reminded me of that aspect. And it is true, and provide the background on the issue that certainly with the Partington Creek neighborhood plan, we got into that in quite a bit of detail with the Fire Rescue Department. So there is some guideline, there's some policies. In this instance here, what we'd be looking at is where the ultimate settlement divide between the settlement area and the ultimate forest lands would be, but in an interim condition like this, we would make Fire Rescue aware of the situation, and they would apply what approaches they would see fit. But also, I appreciate the reminder, because we're just about to embark on this Northwest visioning process, and to me that's going to be a really important element of that, and looking at those, again, those delineation between what may be new neighborhoods and what would be retained as forest into the future. We certainly want to think about that interface condition. So we'll have a discussion with Fire Rescue on this particular subdivision, but certainly across the wider area, we need to look at that aspect as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Asmundson.
Well, thank you very much. On to the zoning. I think, once again, as we've been explained, that the yield is the same as an RS9, which is original zoning, to the RS8. And actually, since we're having a 25 to 30% larger lot with an RS8 house, gives more land around it. And these houses are going to be expensive, so they will probably have a lot of hardy board siding, the more expensive treatments, which will also protect them from fire hazards. I think, as Mr. Hodge noticed in his area of the house, the one with the hardy board beside, in pretty good shape. Held up very good. So I'm going to support this application. I think it fits the zoning. It's what was planned for in the original OCP. The density lot allowance is the same, so I think it's a good development. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing none others. Second, third, and fourth, the zoning are all in favor. Opposed? Councillor Zarrillo is opposed. The motion carries.
Item 5 relates to Northeast Streets, completion of functional design process. This was deferred from the January 20th regular council meeting. The recommendation is that council endorse the functional plan for David Avenue, Coast Meridian to Marigold, as outlined in attachment 4 to the report.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Zakor. Sorry, everybody moved it at the same time. It's everybody except Councillor Asmundson. My apologies. And I'm pretty sure I didn't too. Okay, any discussion? I see Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Well, this is the one I got all excited about last week, after I got all excited about Coast Meridian. So now I'm on to David. And I've talked to several engineers, because we seem to have a lot of those critters running around City Hall. And a couple of things I've learned.
Not that it's a bad thing.
Critter status is good with me. A couple of things I learned is that there's no right answer when it comes to engineering. All the engineers have their own way of doing things. That I guess there's textbooks that tells you what you can and should do. But some engineers perhaps don't agree with this, and others do, and that they take a whole bunch of experience and scientific knowledge and they put it all into one and they come up with a plan, and that's what we did. So, thank you, Joseph, for your email and all your information on David, and I concur. So I only have a couple of questions. One, and the biggest one for me, again, is the firefighters. So could you please put up a diagram, you said you had one, of the lot where the new fire hall is going? So my biggest concern last week, I really thought that David should be 4 lanes, but I won't argue with the wisdom of all the engineers. But David is going to go down into our village center, and who knows how busy that's going to be. My biggest concern was the north-south, Princeton, I guess, that we would have access and egress for the fire trucks. I've been told no, that all access and egress for the fire trucks will be off David, and that David is indeed 3 lanes wide plus bike lanes. Is that correct?
And the turning lane at this critical intersection.
And the turning lane, so that the fire trucks will be able to go in and out with no problem, correct? Even in snowstorms, right?
Within reason, yes, it is correct. The proposed fire hall site will have 2 access locations, both of them on David. The westerly one is somewhat narrower than the proposed easterly access. The westerly is the ingress, where the easterly will be the egress, the exit, and it's wider because that's how the fire engines are lined up in their parking area. So they can just straight drive out to the curb line, make a right or left turn as appropriate, and because of the ultimate curb-to-curb pavement which we are proposing, that, as you mentioned, includes 2 bicycle lanes, 2 traveling lanes, and a turning lane, it's ample enough to make the turning movement. We have demonstrated this through turning templates and whatnot. Now, when it comes to snow, David is an arterial, so it's a priority 1 route when it comes to snow and ice control. And because we also have boulevards, if necessary, we can actually plow the snow onto the boulevards, so it will not cut into the effective width of the roadway as fire trucks move in and out.
That's what concerns me, because since our meeting last week, I've had actually people phoning and talking about they're glad we're going that far up now. And then, of course, all the provincial lands came into it, which I have no answer for, but they're going to come in. But one of the problems was in a big snowstorm that with 2 lanes and there's nowhere to put some of the snow, I mean, it virtually would block off. People would have to stop traveling either way until they got it cleared enough. So I don't know if that's true or not. But in any event, as long as we can get the fire trucks in and out with ease, I'm quite happy. So I'm sure you're going to work with the fire chief, and I will approve this new engineering feat.
Let me comment on, we will get the trucks.
Can you speak up a bit, Joseph? Sorry.
Sorry. We will get the fire trucks out, even under adverse weather conditions. I can't promise that it's going to be with an ease, but it will be with an effort.
Okay, thank you.
I've never heard it put that way. Councillor Asmussen.
Well, thank you very much, and I will thank Joseph for his and staff their information providing to council on the Millard, David through widening through to Princeton and east to Princeton. And the one question I do have, though, is we made a decision to do, which I voted against, Coast Meridian 4 lanes all the way up to Harper for Princeton at an extra $1.5 million. Will that have an effect of the funding for the David Avenue and Victoria roadworks?
Through your worship, our budget for the, or rather cost estimate that was prepared just about a year ago or so for the northeast arterials totals approximately $20 million. Out of that $20 million, the city council approved a borrowing bylaw for $9.2 million, which is primarily designated for the design and construction of Coast Meridian Road. The construction was estimated last fall at $7.1 million, property acquisitions in the range of $650,000, and off-site environmental compensation was estimated at $1.45 million, totaling $9.2 million. In the meantime, we learned that DFO at this point did not require us to do off-site environmental mitigation work. Therefore, in a sense, we are saving potentially $1.45 million. And that is the amount that can be, and at this point proposed to use, for that additional $1.5 million that's required to make that critical section or questionable section of Coast Meridian a 4-lane section. However, if we were to just save that amount of money, certainly it could be and would be used for the other northeast arterials, either David and or Victoria.
Okay, thank you very much. And I note in your report that the about not widening David and staying to the concept plan, as noted, wider streets tend to lead to increased speeding, longer crossing distance for pedestrians that we'll be putting onto Coast Meridian. Thank you.
Councillor Hodge.
Well, I thank Councillor Asmussen for raising that point, because that's good news that we've saved that money, and so that essentially we are going to be able to do that work within budget. So I'm really happy to hear that, and I think, of course, it's important to note that these roads are built with money that DCC, so the developers pay for this. This is not the taxpayers. It's not coming out of their tax bill at the end of the month. This is what developers are supposed to do: is pay for roads and make sure that we have adequate roads and make sure that we have the right roads. And I think we've got it right now on Coast Meridian, but I think we've got it right on David. And I had some questions about David, but they've been answered now, and so I appreciate we took the time to sort of get those clarifications, and I think we've got it right here as well. My concern has always been along here, primarily the parking. We know we have an issue with the parking in the 3400 block of David. Those homes enter from the back. There's no street parking for visitors at the front. And then I'm looking here and I see a little blue triangle here that says 4 or 5 spots within the fire hall site. That's at the top of the hill. Is that being proposed that will now be for common parking? And I was sort of unclear if that was fire hall parking or if it's going to be something to help alleviate the parking problems in the neighborhood.
Through your worship, the blue area can accommodate 4 or 5 vehicles. The actual site is on the fire department side, but because of the elevation differences, as you could see even today with the ongoing construction, for all practical purposes, it's not accessible from the fire hall. But it's very conveniently located at the intersection of Galloway and the easterly end of the lane behind. And so from there we can create 4 or 5 public parking stalls at an approximate cost of about $20,000.
And again, I think that's good news for the residents in there, because I was concerned about the parking in that area. So I think that if we can do that at a reasonable cost, that will help to alleviate a potential problem when that road is built out. So thank you. I think that's another win and one more reason why I'm going to support this. Thank you.
I'm tempted to suggest that since the parking spaces that you're proposing to create are actually on the fire hall site, could we not let rookie firefighters park up there or something? Great idea. The fire chief laughs, but nervously. That's right. Okay. No other speakers? All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. No. We have other items.
Can you just bring up the PowerPoint? So item 6 is our on-table item from this evening. It's an appointment to the Joint Family Court and Youth Justice Committee. The recommendation is that Afra Sarafi be appointed as the City of Coquitlam representative to the Joint Family Court and Youth Justice Committee.
So moved. Moved by Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Nicholson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried, with the thanks of council to Afra Sarafi.
Afra Sarafi.
Afra Sarafi.
Yes.
There we go. Okay.
Okay. That concludes the items on the agenda.
Councillor Zarrillo.
Yes. I have a notice of motion, so is this the correct time?
This is fine, yep.
So I have a notice of motion to bring to the floor. So if you could guide me through the.
Yep. You'd normally mention who seconded it and read the be it resolved portion. And then you'll circulate it later.
Okay. So I have a notice of motion for the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion, seconded by Councillor Nicholson. Whereas Kinder Morgan is proposing a major pipeline upgrade that will significantly increase its capacity, and whereas the pipeline runs through the City of Coquitlam, and whereas there are potential impacts to city services, businesses, and residents, therefore be it resolved that the City of Coquitlam apply to the National Energy Board for intervenor status.
So that will be on the February 3rd agenda for council consideration.
discuss tonight?
No.
No, it's a notice of motion.
Notice of motion.
Yeah.
Oh.
Waive a notice of motion?
The time limit is the mid-February, so, yeah. We do have time, otherwise it would probably qualify as an emergency. We could have the waiving of notice.
I think.
We missed a meeting for the family.
Then I'll move that we dispense with the time motion that, 2 weeks from now to be discussed. We can discuss it tonight.
Well, it will be discussed in 1 week.
In 1 week.
Or 1 week. Yeah.
And it's not an emergency because in 1 week we still would have time. The motion is Councillor Zakor moves to waive notice. I'm uncomfortable waiving notice. I don't think we have any information about it, about the process. Well, intervenor status is worth about $100,000. It's an expensive decision. So,
I think we should get our information.
Anybody?
Good motion on the floor.
Well, it hasn't been seconded. Anybody else?
I'll second it so we can talk about it.
Okay. Councillor Hodge seconds it. My apologies. I didn't acknowledge a seconder because I didn't hear one. You didn't technically. Okay, I've got Councillor. Okay, this is not on the notice of motion, of course. It's on the motion to waive procedure. Councillor Wilson.
I think it's important that we have intervenor status just to be safe, just to make sure that we're.
This is not on.
No, I know, but sorry. You said it was $100,000 potentially, and I was just.
That's what other communities have allocated for legal costs of intervening.
So if they had to prepare and go in.
Bit of background. Metro Vancouver, for example, just resolved to intervene on behalf of Lower Mainland communities. So Metro Vancouver is intervening. There are some communities that have particular issues with it. District of North Vancouver, because of the potential for a spill to affect their coastline. But most communities aren't intervening largely because of that cost. So I don't have the exact cost. I just know that other communities have quoted the $100,000 number as the cost of. It's an expensive legal. You end up with a lawyer and such, and that's why I would prefer to have us make this decision next week when we could potentially have at least enough information to make it, because it is potentially expensive. So.
And is it correct that Belcarra has applied for intervenor status?
I don't know. I don't know about Belcarra.
I thought I'd heard that, so that's why I was just surprised at the $100,000 cost.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Councillor O'Neill.
Yeah, two things. Within a few hours of Trans Mountain and Kinder Morgan coming out with their new routing for this, or the routing that they're applying for, I recall sending an email to the city manager asking for some analysis of the impact of this route on the city, and the city manager responded that somebody would be working on that. I wonder if the city manager has just as a bit of background going forward, one way or the other, whether we end up debating this or not tonight, can give me a little background on that, and maybe that would coincide with everything coming back to us next week.
Can you give us time frame for the background related to this decision?
When this issue first came off, we had a discussion at E-Team, and we decided that the whole issue was of big enough importance that we would assign it to strategic initiatives, with Maurice Gravel and Tracy Kyle taking the initiative to provide some background in this regard. They are actively working on a report now. I think it probably could be pulled together for next week. I don't know the exact status, but I have been given some notes that Tracy pulled together that gives some background on the issue and gives some background on potential issues to consider with respect to intervenor status that we could make available for next week. I don't know if Maurice has any further information on the timing of the review that they were doing.
Yes, sure. So, we are still in the process of gaining some information. We were told that we were to receive some alignment changes from the company as recently as Friday, but we hadn't received them as noon today, so we're still waiting for that information. Once we have that information, we can look at it and pull together a short report for council's information.
Thank you very much. So I'm uncomfortable with proceeding with this tonight in light of that, and in light of the fact that you guys all know how much I like to do some research and pull up a lot of information, and there's only so much I can do on the fly here. And so I'd be much more comfortable dealing with this next week. We'd have a better idea about what it would cost. We'd have a good chance of getting a report on some of the issues pertaining to Coquitlam from our staff, and you'd make me a happier man if we don't proceed with this tonight. So I would definitely vote against waiving this leave. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Nicholson, on the question of waiving procedure.
Ready? I'm glad to hear that staff are working on a report. I don't think that report is particularly necessary to the question that's being proposed. I think it's, in fact, all that's asked in the motion that we may consider tonight or not in a week is to apply for intervener status. That simply puts your name on the list, and the decision about whether to actually intervene, whether to activate your place on the list, what the costs might be, all that can be done not necessarily next week, but staff, knowing that we have a place on the list, can prepare their report with that in mind. We can get an actual budget instead of I'm afraid, you know, if Metro budgeted $100,000, I'd be astonished if we couldn't do it for 3. You know, I think that's the kind of typical measure of Metro's budgeting. But it's a fairly simple question for tonight, and I think it would actually inform the work of staff on the report that's coming forth, if they know that they're preparing a report that will help us decide whether to actually pursue an intervention. Tonight's decision is whether to get our names on the list, and there's a more than 1 week, but not a terribly long time frame to do that. And that's why I would like to act on it tonight. It's a simple question. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Hodge.
Yeah, I guess the question is, I'm sort of trying to wrestle. I'm glad I seconded because I appreciate this discussion. I know there's a time frame. I suppose that by next week we could still meet that deadline, but we don't know what the cost is. We may not know that cost in a week, but my understanding is that a lot of groups, and not just big cities, but individuals are asking for intervener status. So they're obviously not coming up with a $100,000 budget. So I think that the question tonight is, do we want to put our name on the list? And that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to attend the party, but I think we want to make sure that we have that invitation. And so I think the question put that way is quite simple, is do we want to leave our options open? And we may not choose to exercise that right, particularly if we find out it's going to cost $100,000 or the staff report suggests not. But I think we just want to put our name and say that, yes, we want to be able to speak if need be, and we may choose not to speak if we find out there's going to be huge legal fees and everything else. But I think this is a pretty simple question. Without taking a position on the project or anything, I think we're just saying we want to be able to speak if something arises that concerns the citizens of Coquitlam. So I think that whether we discuss this tonight or we discuss it next week, I think it's a no-brainer to say put us on the list. Then we can decide what the cost is going to be down the road. And I agree with what Neil just said, that maybe if staff knows that we're interested in having the intervener status, that then they will take a different approach to the report, and they can write the report with that in mind, that this is a direction that we want to go, assuming that we make that decision tonight. So I think that this isn't a big risk. It's just saying, let's put us on the list, and then we can proceed as to whether or not we want to intervene. So we're not asking to intervene. We're just saying, give us that opportunity. If I get this right, is that correct? Yep. Okay, good.
Well, okay, and I take it completely differently. Normally you waive procedure if something is emergent. There's some reason why it has to be done this week and can't be done next week. It can be done up until the 15th. Okay. So there isn't any reason why we ought to be making the decision tonight. But the suggestion that staff might write a different report if we decide tonight to register for intervention, as though staff then know we want to intervene, well, that's not what I've heard several members of council say. Well, no, we'll just decide tonight to put a place marker in case we want to intervene. Well, why don't we do that next week? It's an odd way to make decisions. Let's hurry up and make a decision before we have the facts, and then we can unmake the decision if it turns out we don't want to, or we want to rely on the intervention that Metro Vancouver is already doing on our behalf. So I won't be able to support waiving procedure. The procedure was there to protect council members' right to get sufficient information to make decisions, rather than force council members to make decisions in the absence of that information, as we're being asked to now, and I'm just not going to be able to do that. Councillor Asmussen.
Well, thank you. I'm not going to support the motion. I don't see the sudden rush. We can get the fullness of time to get a report next week, make a decision. That'll be February 3rd. There's no decision made to the 15th. When Benita brought this up to me, she said, I want to have the notice motion for next week so that we can make sure it's in by the 15th, because there's no meeting on the 10th. And I thought, okay, fine. You know, we'll deal with it next week on the 3rd. Gives everybody a time. There's plenty of time to make a decision. I really don't like the idea of us making a decision, say we're going to be intervening, then turn around and say, oh, you know what? We got some more information and we're not going to do that. Now, it makes us like we don't know what we're doing. And so I'd rather have us some information in front of us, have staff who are working on this issue already, as Councillor O'Neill pointed out, and then make our decision. We did make this rule about waiting a couple of weeks or a week to give councillors the time, as Councillor O'Neill pointed out, to research, give himself some thoughts about whether this is necessary. And is it necessary for every city to intervene when Metro Vancouver has already moved to intervene on the whole region? Are we simply duplicating an effort? And where is the pipe going through? I've seen some different maps that shows it really skirts Coquitlam, and is it going to be an issue for most of Coquitlam? So we need to have that information before we decide to intervene and potentially move forward. But I don't want to put my name down saying we're going to intervene and turn around and say, oh, guess we got the information now and we're not intervening. Thank you very much. So I don't want to do that. Won't support it.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Councillor Zerillo, being new to this game of politics, shall we say, I assume, and if I may, Your Worship, I'd just like to ask a question. Sure. I assume, Councillor Zerillo, that you figured you'd put the notice of motion tonight and you'd discuss it next week. Was that what you did? That's what you assumed?
No, right. That was the discussion we had.
Because that's, oh.
Yes, well, what's happening is on December 3rd, we have the availability. February 12th is actually the deadline, not the 15th. And with Family Day, it only leaves us till next Monday. So yes, I had to bring it tonight, because if we needed to take the week, we would need to have the February 3rd day, because the 10th is a holiday and 12th is cut-off time.
So I'm just making sure that you were up to the facts on procedure, where you put the notice of motion at one meeting and we discuss it at the next.
Understood.
But, so if that's what you were planning on doing, why don't we just do what Councillor Zerillo was planning, and then everybody's happy? Aren't we? Yeah.
Okay. And now Councillor Sikora again.
Yeah, thank you. I see no harm, you know. I mean, we always leave things to the last minute. We push it up to the last minute, The one thing about it that I hear that Langley, Abbotsford, and everybody else is jumping on the bandwagon. And I see nothing wrong with us saying, yeah, we'll make a motion that we, put our name on it. And look, if we decide next week that we're not going to intervene or not going to speak, that's fine with me. But in the meantime, we'd have put a marker in there that we are intending to be one of the speakers. And I see nothing wrong with that. All we're now putting politics in there and getting into try and divert an issue.
Councillor Sikora, this isn't politics, it's the procedure bylaw that you voted on.
I know, and I move the motion that we forego, because, Mayor,
This is the procedure.
This is not the first time of us acting on something the night of a motion has been served.
Oh, I know.
Am I correct?
It's true that
Okay,
sometimes
so,
when something has to be done the same night, we do waive
This is one of those issues, and the fact is, I know that there's some of the council members don't like it, even wouldn't like it next week, or what it'd be last month or 2 months
Councillor
from
Sikora,
now.
it's only about the waiving the procedure. Councillor Nicholson.
I'll be voting for it.
Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, it would be nice to say that Councillor O'Neill convinced me, and that's certainly part of it, because his research is always helpful. I just hope that, and so I am not going to support the motion to waive. I'm going to wait a week, and I look forward to hearing everything that Councillor O'Neill has to say to us, and I simply hope he doesn't give it in his radio voice. But that's a vain hope, I fear. But I would like to make it clear that it's, as I see it, that doesn't mean that it's necessary for staff to have a report for us next week, because next week's decision is about whether to put our names on the list so that, having seen a staff report that's as full and complete as it can be, we can decide whether we wish to appear as interveners and what we would like to say. And that's going to be a much, much longer discussion, I expect. And this is the time frame to get on the list. It's not the time frame to decide what to do with that position. Thank you.
Okay. So what will undoubtedly unfold here, I gather, is a staff report, a preliminary staff report, and if council decides to go ahead, then there'll be a more complete staff report to determine a course of action and a budget and such.
That is correct. We will give some preliminary background on what we know and what it means to be an intervener, and it won't be the full report. We can either do that by memo, or we can actually, if there's enough time, we'll actually put it on the agenda. But traditionally on some notice of motions like this, we at least give a little bit of background information, which at a minimum, that's what we will do.
New information, Councillor Zerlo?
Nope, that was good, thank you, so I'm okay.
Oh, you've activated your microphone, that's all. Okay. We'll kill you. Sorry, kill your microphone. Okay, it has to pass. It's a motion to waive procedure. It requires a 2/3 majority. All in favor of waiving procedure? All opposed to waiving procedure? I've got Councillor Hodge, Nicholson, Reid, myself, Councillor Asmundson, Councillor Wilson, and Councillor O'Neill. By my count, it doesn't make it. Motion to waive fails. We will have this on the agenda for next. Sorry?
Didn't say nothing.
Oh, you didn't say nothing. Oh. Okay, sorry. It'll be on the agenda for next Monday.
That concludes the agenda.
That does include. Councillor Nicholson moves adjournment. Councillor, the Irish have been in lockstep today. Councillor O'Neill seconds. All in favor of adjournment. All opposed. Motion carries. No, it's not quite unanimous. Councillor Wilson is opposed, but it carries anyway. Are there any? Oh my goodness. We have question period before the puns continue. Any questions on tonight's agenda from our audience? Any questions at all on tonight's agenda? On tonight's agenda, any questions at all? It had to be more interesting than that. Come on. Thank you all for coming.